The best part of all this, you can't tell who's wearing pants right now. Yes. Thank you for checking.
It's nice. I was telling Seth last night, I was like, I think I'm a cool person. And he was like, yeah.
Whatever was in your bowels ain't anymore. Welcome to the Pedagogy Hypothesis, a great source for learning about education, a terrible source for learning how to talk to parrots. To start with complete nonsense. Welcome to the Pedagogy Hypothesis, episode 6. Today, we're talking about evaluation and assessment and all kinds of like fun stuff in regards to like making sure you're doing the right stuff.
Oh, my hair.
Hey, Jenny's back. We've missed you. We've missed you all so much.
What
It's
up,
so
Jenny?
good to see you all. As previously mentioned, my name is Patrick Kelly. I am a junior high science teacher, YouTube content creator. This is my fabulous friend Caileen, who does lots of cool stuff.
I feel like I just had like a Vanna White moment, like, and this is Vanna White.
Introducing.
I'm like, shut up,
Yes.
Pat. Like,
Fine. Introduce yourself.
I'm
You're-
Caileen.
What do you
There's
do?
just so many fucking
We're already starting off great.
I am a graduate pedagogy fellow for the Center for Innovations in Teaching and Learning at the University of California, Santa Cruz, and I'm a PhD candidate in chemistry.
We've never talked about it on this show before, but like you do cool stuff in your research.
I do.
As far we
Yeah.
like one of the first things Caileen said to me today was like, I think I'm cool. Like finally, I think I'm cool.
No, I mean, yeah, sometimes it takes like 3 decades to fucking figure it out.
We need to have like a rolling counter. If anybody in the audience would like to start a rolling Caileen F-word counter, we'd appreciate that.
No, I'm gonna knock it off.
Just respond like, I think we're up to 2 right now, so
We've been doing this for 2 minutes.
less
Good.
than, yeah.
1 a minute. Solid. Okay.
Yeah, so you do cool stuff is all we're
I
saying.
do sometimes do cool stuff, and I think that I'm cool, finally.
Finally.
It's taken me 28 years to think that I'm cool, but
Thank you, Willie, for getting that.
better late than never, I guess.
Yeah.
You're cool too, by the way.
Thanks.
All right.
More on that hopefully when stuff comes out. But, okay, I want to start something off that kind of goes into this evaluation topic that we were talking about today. We got some good feedback earlier this week, I think, where somebody messaged you and they said something along the lines of like, your stuff is good. Like, your stuff is helping me do stuff.
Oh, yes. With
Yeah.
regards towards pH.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like, this is some of the best feedback that we've gotten so far. Because comments
Yes.
are good, like interaction is good, and we like super appreciate that. But the fact that somebody was like found some value in what we're doing is dope. Like that's really cool.
It was a faculty lecturer from my university actually used one of our videos because episode 1 is establishing classroom climate on day 1. And she showed that video to her teaching assistants before class started and was able to like have a conversation with her teaching assistants about
Yep.
how to establish your classroom climate. So you can actually use these as resources within your educational system, which is pretty flippin' rad.
And that's a nice try. We know what you meant to say. We know what was in your brain. But that got me thinking. I feel like the benefit of this show for people who like stick around or for people who want to use this as a resource is just like being able to talk about their working life and being a teacher with people who care, like with other people who are being critical of like their own working life.
Yeah.
And that is something I feel like we don't do a lot of. Like, I feel like most people watching this don't have, thank you.
2.5.
That's great. Thank you, Willie.
That's rad.
But yeah, like a lot of people who get into this kind of stuff don't necessarily have somebody to talk to at their school or institution about pedagogy.
That's true. Yeah.
It does, like you're in a special situation.
And kind of forked up.
Yeah. Yep. Where I'm trying to be serious. I'm trying to like start this off on a good.
No,
like
you're
a,
doing great.
Fine.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. I have a point here. I promise.
You're doing great, man.
Thanks. But we have, yeah, like there's an opportunity to finally talk about this stuff with people, and like the idea that we might start to like build a community around people who give a heck about pedagogy. God damn it.
Yeah.
Is like that's a cool thing to me. So I don't know.
2.6.
And thank you.
2.75.
You know, the homies. But that parlays into today's topic of evaluation and assessment.
Yes.
Because
Nice segue.
it's like I planned this or something. Thinking about what you're actually doing with your work or with whatever you're trying to do is the purpose of all of this. It's like make it better.
Yeah.
Whether that is like giving an assessment to to your students so that they can like check their knowledge and then progress or pick up the slack. Or if it's like in your own working life and you're like, all right, I need to do this better because I've been failing hard at this.
Yeah, and today we're going to be discussing evaluation and assessment from a couple different perspectives. So there's the perspective of evaluation as far as like evaluating your own performance and evaluating how you're doing at your job. And then there's the perspective of assessment of how do you assess that someone has gained knowledge in something.
Yeah, like very different, honestly, like very different things. Like how you...
But they made the most sense for an episode to come together. So
Whatever. Yeah. I feel like we can talk about them in the same vein and still have some kind of continuity.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so where do you want to start?
Let's answer... What do you want to answer the question last?
We'll answer that. We'll answer that last. We got a couple feedback questions, and if you want to ask any questions, you can go to either Caileen's Instagram, Kay Morrison, or the SciCommunity, and we'll be able to pick up on those questions. It's a recent post. You can just let us know what those questions are, or of course, put them in the chat here.
Yup. So we have 3 primary groups that we're going to talk about today for evaluation. Those groups are K through 12, higher ed, and then self-evaluation. And we've kind of have broken this down into we have a table. We made a table.
I'm not bragging or anything.
We're not bragging or anything, but we have a table on a Word document. So
we take this seriously.
And it's on a tablet, so we're very serious. So we have this broken down from external evaluation to internal evaluation and then implementation.
Yep.
So how do you take these types of evaluations and actually put them into some sort of action?
Yeah. What's the difference, real quick? Like between I feel like it's intuitive, but like what is an external and internal evaluation?
Good question. So we're defining here an external evaluation as something outside of yourself gives you.
So like
that was very not a good way to English that, but
it's a good try.
An external evaluation is an evaluation that someone else gives upon you or something else gives upon you. So that can be like a software program or a person or a grade.
Yeah.
That's an external evaluation, something that something was put on to you. Internal evaluations are evaluations that you place upon yourself.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about like when to use either one of those. Like there's a good point to use either of those in K through 12 or in higher ed.
Exactly. And then within that system of external to internal to implementation, we have data coming in as the external. We have resources coming in as your internal evaluations, and then action items as your implementation. So that's kind of our little flow chart today for evaluation is external evaluation as a function of data and input into you. Internal evaluation as a function of resources available to you to do something, and then implementation as a function of action.
Yep. There's this like saying, I forget if it's like within fitness or whatever, but like never step on the scale unless you're going to do something about it. And that's this idea that like the only reason to gather data or to like gather assessment about whether it's your working life, whether it is your students, whether it is like your own behavior, is that you're going to go and have an action item on it. So, like, we're not just assessing because, like, it's November, like, time for another test. Like, no, you're going to hopefully be doing something with that information.
Right. So, K through 12 is first, buddy.
All right, let's do that. I gotta go on here first. All right. You're probably used to getting a grade of some kind. Like, this is something that most school systems around the world are going to do. Provide some kind of feedback that is, like, a quantifiable amount. Why? One, because of like it's something we've always been doing and traditions die slowly in education. But also because it is at least a metric that is a little bit more objective. So we're going to go through a couple of them. And unfortunately, I don't have a ton of them, but it's okay. We have more.
I just realized that I have a table and you don't have a table.
You know what? Well, I have a great personality.
You do have a great personality.
Hey, thank you.
You're really cool.
Thanks, whatever. Okay, so the first thing we'll talk about is our evaluation of grade performance in that year. So like within the year itself, there are hopefully a lot of checkpoints that you're going to use to assess student learning. And that can be a few different ways. I like to think of it at like the micro level, the macro level, and then at whatever checkpoint you have. So usually that's going to be a semester, trimester, whatever. Within the day-to-day, you have the ability to get an assessment of whatever you're teaching is, and you really should do that. Like, you really should make sure that like whatever you threw at the wall stuck, or if it.
Sorry.
This is how I talk to my colleagues. I swear.
My brain just went to like, sorry.
What did you imagine being thrown at a wall, Caileen?
Like a water balloon, but full of paint. So you can make a
Yeah.
painting on the wall.
Did you? Never mind. This is gonna get off track. Really, one of my favorite rom-coms, other than 10 Things I Hate About You, is
Patrick's favorite rom-com.
and don't you forget it. Is the Princess Diaries? Have you seen that movie?
Oh wait, no, I haven't.
No.
I was thinking of The Princess Bride. I'm so sorry.
The Princess Bride is a great movie too, but The Princess Diaries.
Oh, is that with Anne Hathaway?
Yes, it has Anne Hathaway, but more importantly, it has Julie Andrews, the queen of all queens.
She is
literally
the queen of all
playing
queens.
a queen.
Yeah.
But they have a scene in which they are popping balloons made out of paint. That story does not help me tell the assessment story at all. But finally, yep, okay, thank you.
On the wall is where I went.
Yeah,
Solid.
yep, exactly. So we're throwing stuff at a wall. Good. Okay, this is gonna be a good time.
There's also an album called The Wall.
Yeah. Shout out to
Huge
Pink
album.
Floyd.
Yeah.
So, from a day-to-day perspective, you have to do something to make sure that your thing stuck, right? Making sure that you didn't just like preach for an hour and it was completely like glossed over and your students have no idea what you're talking about. So there has to be an assessment of some kind. Whether that is just like probing questions, like asking questions to your students to make sure that they at least got a little bit of it. It doesn't have to be mastery right away, but it does have to be something where you at least are comfortable with like, hey, if they go back to their parents later tonight and they're like, what did you learn in school today? And they're like, I got no idea. You know, like you don't want that to happen. You instead, yeah, again, for both.
There's an album called The Wall, Mom. I don't know.
Yeah, that's all we learned. Mr. Kelly's weird. I've definitely had that a couple times. I'll tell you the story. Teaching at a religious school can be weird sometimes. And so the day-to-day assessment is super important. That will save you for when it actually starts counting towards a grade. Because maybe those little assessments can be like...
Can you give an example of what those little assessments are?
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of people will consider like a worksheet to be busy work, right? You stick somebody with a worksheet, you have the student complete it, it takes like 15 minutes and you don't have to talk to them for 15 minutes. But if that's done correctly, so if there's actually an example of some critical thinking put on a worksheet or some design or engineering concept placed on a worksheet, then you can make sure that it's not just like find the answer in the book. It is this stuck enough so that you can apply it. I'm not saying that worksheets are the only thing, but demonstration is another key thing. So if
you demonstrating or the
no,
students
the children,
demonstrating?
yeah, like the students demonstrating. Okay. Because if you actually think like, how many times have you done this in your life where you think I've got this, and then it comes to either teaching something or actually doing the thing, and you have no idea what you're talking about
all the time.
Yeah. Of course, and I'm sure this happens to like everybody out there too, where you thought you had some idea and then you get the actual like IKEA furniture or whatever you're trying to do, and you're like the dog meme with the chemistry set. I have no idea what I'm doing. You've seen this meme.
I am that meme.
Yes. Okay. Good. We're on the same page. We got a comment that accountability is key, and I Stellar Scientific. I totally agree. Accountability on everybody's end, though.
Yeah.
You know, not just on the part of the teacher to make sure that like they're teaching effectively, but yeah, on the student as well. So I like that. In
K through 12 education, how can you evaluate students' work habits if they are learning work habits?
Ooh, that's okay. So this is a conversation that we have a lot. Like this is something I think that my colleagues are crushing right now. Like how can we make sure? Outdoor school, Willie. We'll be talking about that. I think in 2 episodes. No, we talked about that last time about learning environments. But yeah, thank you. We'll for sure.
We took out the recess episode, sadly.
We can incorporate a little bit. So the question was like, how do we make sure that they're doing good learning while they're still learning the learning habits? Correct. Okay. So it does take some conscious effort on the part of the educator, parents, and the students. So for instance, I teach majority junior high, but oh, good. We'll get to those questions too. Love it. Or it doesn't seem like a question, but I love it. Make it so you have to set them up for it. So for instance, I also teach 5th graders at the youngest. So they don't necessarily know how to take notes yet. Like when you get to college, you understand like the professor's going to talk for an hour. We're not going to get to interrupt them. And like, we're just going to have to like absorb whatever they're saying.
Well,
unless they're in your class.
That's what we're trying to abolish.
Exactly. So the 5th graders don't necessarily understand. They have to like really get like they have to put some work in to understand it a little bit more. It's not just like copy down whatever is in the book or on the whiteboard and then regurgitate that on the test. There is a little bit of application starting in as young as I mean, hopefully as young as first grade. But when I teach the fifth graders, for sure. So like on, I think Thursday of this week, we went through one of the chapters and the material was pretty good. It was phase changes.
Okay.
So like solid to liquid, liquid to gas, all that stuff. And we went through and we set, like, I modeled on my iPad up on the screen, like, this is what I would do if I were taking notes. This seems like a key concept, which within next generation science standards, the standard that California uses and a lot of the other states in the country use, identifying a key concept and how it relates to a bunch of other concepts within, say, like physical, life, and earth sciences are all, like, that's a big deal. So it does take, to answer your question, it does take conscious effort to do so.
Okay.
And I think that now, that K through 8 is really essential for it.
Yeah, I wanted to address Stellar Scientific's question really quick before it gets lost in the slew. Are schools still using problem-based learning or PBL? Yes, we are still using problem-based learning. That's actually a really effective way to learn. But as you mentioned a lot in Pedagogy Hypothesis, you still need to create, you don't need to, but ideally, you would use problem-based learning in a social environment because it kind of helps stick it a little bit better. But yeah, problem-based learning still has a lot of value to it because it creates a narrative, and students tend to respond really well to narratives. So problem-based learning is still very prominent. It seems like someone else mentioned that they also use it in TOEFL, which is awesome.
Linguistics, teaching methodology stuff from Cambridge. Awesome.
So this isn't just a US-based thing. There's still problem-based learning globally, which is fantastic.
Yeah. Awesome. I feel like that is like the best application of science too. You have a problem that you want to solve, or just like knowledge that you were trying to acquire.
Yes.
I don't know if you think about it super critically in what do you teach? An undergrad? I'm blanking on what exactly we're talking about right now.
I teach biochemistry and molecular biology usually.
Yeah. So when I have like the younger students, we've separated the idea that there is like an engineering process and a scientific method. It's just it's an NGSS thing that like we're supposed to teach the engineering method as a way to solve a problem versus the scientific method as a way of finding out information. Do you does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Sort of.
Yeah, it's like I feel like there's way too much overlap to have two very distinct methods.
Yeah.
There's going to be like dipping into both of them, but like we're supposed to teach this thing, so I do my job. Do you feel like covering stuff like the scientific method as early or as late as freshmen and sophomores in undergrad is still valuable?
Yes. Ideally, you'd be learning the scientific method earlier, and the scientific method now it's not archaic, but it can be edited.
Yeah.
Which is nice. Yes, to answer your question, I think it's still fine if the earliest time they see it is freshman and sophomore year in higher ed, but ideally they should see it earlier.
Oh, okay. I was saying that as like, do you feel like they should be repeating it again? I never thought about like if the first time they were exposed to it was undergrad. But then again, there are people who come from backgrounds like that who might not be hearing about it until getting to freshman year of college. Yeah. So, man, okay.
All right.
I guess we should move on to the next thing.
Yes.
Evaluation of academic performance across time. All right, so this is the idea that hopefully you have some kind of knowledge of where your students have come from. Perfect, I get center stage, I'll take it. Yeah, so you have an idea of where your students have come from. Whether that's because you're looking at their records, whether like, I've had some of my students since they were in 3rd grade and I see them as junior high students now. And so that like allows me to say like, man, this kid has super grown up, has had this relationship with science education for this long, and I've seen their journey. I know what kind of influences they have. I have worked along assessing them a lot, like many times a year and many times over their lifetime now. That's really cool. Where that comes out is different across the year. So like I have on here on our little outline like ParentTeacher Conferences, which are still a thing. Like we have ours in a week and a half or something.
Crazy.
Yeah, no, next week it's Sunday. Not this week. The audience doesn't care. But like, we have ours coming up, and I'm thinking like, what's the purpose of these things? Like, why do we actually have a parent-teacher conference still? Is it like, I remember growing up, it was just an excuse to, like, for my parents and teachers to yell at me for not turning in my homework. Because, believe it or not, I was not always, like, into science. But that's... Sorry, go ahead.
You didn't come out of the womb just, like, doing science?
No, that's correct. But then again, like, those times, I never loved parent-teacher conferences. I'm assuming that you all never really liked parent-teacher conferences or whatever that variation was, like the meetings, the conferences, whatever. So what's the purpose of these? Well, it's hopefully to give a little bit of a checkpoint so that you can, again, direct some kind of future action. We're coming up, I'm going to be with my 8th graders. We're going to be talking about high school, of course. We're going to be talking about like their performance so far, what they actually want to get out of this year, like what resources we can provide them to achieve the thing that they want to do before they leave our junior high. So like that is going to be the purpose of that. One, because that's seeing a child as an entire person, and that's kind of the big deal. But that is also allowing us to see like what are we doing? Like what are we as teachers doing that we can better support this, like to better support this student. I'll move on from there. Oh, and I guess otherwise, across time. So we've mentioned in a couple episodes this idea of we have like standardized tests for certain things. I use one called the STAR test to assess language, arts, and math. This it's a awesome automated test. It like goes in difficulty, so you can really narrow in on what skills that student needs to make up. Not how great they are at whatever, but just like what skills they need to work on. Really good thing to have. And so we have these now, like we're building them up more robustly across time. We started it 2 years ago, so now we've got like a few years of data behind somebody to say like, all right, they have really stayed the same from like 6th grade until now, or they're on a really good upward trend and like clearly they're going to go and we can probably push them a little bit for their 8th grade year, something like that.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Is that a really common form of evaluation for K through 8?
Not yet. So
okay.
I think that previously it had been whatever state standardized test was available for that school. So like we had the Iowa test.
I had the WASL.
Yeah. That's such a fun name. Is that Washington?
Assessment of Student Learning.
Okay, that makes sense. Waffle.
Waffle.
Waffle. Good. Oh, and then, yeah, we've had Castle before, too, California. Okay, love it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have these standardized tests to track, like, okay, hopefully we're doing something with this information. We're seeing, you're getting a score that is like, hey, your English score is right here. It's on par with all the other 4th graders. Mazel tov. But it's not really giving you a chance to say you need to work on these skills so that you can get to the next step. Again, that is the point of all assessment, is to give you action steps and to give you some kind of reflection on your performance. So if we have a better tool for that over time, we're hoping that we can, again, really like be the most effective teachers we can be.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I hope so.
That's good.
I'm not rambling.
That's good. Higher ed time now? Higher ed?
There's a couple. The evaluation of work habits.
Yes.
Okay, so this is something, and I'm looking at the camera too because we're about to run out of our half-hour mark. We recorded a little bit before turning a live stream on, and it was entertaining.
Just a gem of material.
There was some booty shaking involved. That's all I'll say. That's all I'll say. Oh, what's up, Anna?
Hey, Anna.
Yes. We love you, by the way. We decided that we both love you.
I just am not that cool. I was just funny because I said like a half an hour ago, like, I think that I'm finally cool. And then I saw Anna and I was like, fuck.
Number 3, anybody, Will, are you still keeping track?
I guess I'm not that cool. I was cool.
Well.
And then I found Dr. Anna and I'm like, oh shit, back to square one.
Anyway, we love you. So, so we talk about thank you. We're talking about work habits. Encouraging students to self-evaluate is what we're kind of framing this all under. Empowering the students themselves to check in on themselves and to know like, hey, all right, let's be real here. I've been failing like the last couple tests. Is this because... Yeah. Is this because... Thank you for the accurate math. Is this because of something I've been doing? It's probably not going to happen like sporadic or spontaneously is the word I was looking for a lot of younger kids. But with the prompting of like, hey, like we need to talk, young student, then they can encourage a little bit of reflection. Awesome. Okay. And then the last one we have, Oh, and then otherwise, evaluation of working habits. It does take a little bit more conscious work as far as identifying what those work habits are, because those are like pretty definitionally subjective. Like, I'm sure that you've had those people, whether in high school or in undergrad, they bragged about not studying for the test.
Yep.
But yet they always got an A, and you're like, I hate you. I studied for 5 hours last night, and I pulled off this B+, which I'm really proud of. Yep. But you, like, I hate it. I hate it.
Student. I was the
you were that student?
I was the B+ student.
Oh, okay. I'm like,
no.
Thought you were cool.
No.
So that's what we're saying. Hopefully they're going to have those good work habits. It's even stuff like, I've had kids like forget to show their work on a physics problem before. Yeah. Yeah, we're good. Okay. So like right now, that's fine. They can get away with like F equals MA questions. Like, that's fine. There are only 3 variables. But that level of simplicity isn't going to last for a long time. So we got to encourage like the habit of showing work. That gets done before grading for a test, because we've been doing, to bring it back full circle now, we've been doing those daily check-ins, those daily methods of assessment. That is the quote for the entire day.
I thought you were cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so transitioning a little bit to higher ed.
It's very smooth transition too. And boom, let's transition.
I used all my smooth transitions on the Instagram stories, and I just ran out.
No, that was good.
Yeah,
that was
thanks,
good. You had a good one.
All right, so a very common means of evaluation in higher ed for students are grades. Like, for better or for worse.
So I've been told, yeah.
Yeah, for better or for worse, you get grades, because it's very hard to assess a ton of people in any way besides just giving them an A through an F or whatever. And so again, if we're thinking about the segue of the population that we're looking at being students, the kind of external sources that they get, internal sources that they get, and actions that they get, that external source is a grade. Mm-hmm. And so, and students are motivated to get grades through a couple of different ways. We tend to think of motivation in 2 ways, either extrinsic or intrinsic motivation. Yep. Intrinsic motivation being like, I think this shit's really cool and I want to learn about it. Extrinsic motivation being, I just want to get a good grade.
How often is that external motivation still applied in undergrad? Because we use it all the time. Like, well, plenty of people still use it all the time in undergrad. Like, you got to go to your good high school, because again, private.
Is extrinsic motivation still used for external evaluation?
Is, I guess, how, if we're gonna think of K through 8 being mostly extrinsic motivation, just because this is you becoming the student that you're going to be.
Okay.
Or becoming the person that you're going to be. And you got to do this because like you have to work with all kinds of people you don't like, and you're going to have to do all kinds of jobs you don't want to do.
Right.
I feel like
so motivating, by the way.
Yeah, clearly. I feel like K through 8 is mostly extrinsic motivation. Mm-hmm. And struggling to get these students motivated is a big challenge.
Yeah.
How much of an undergrad is the motivation shifting towards intrinsic motivation?
I don't feel qualified to answer that question.
Sure.
But I would say that compared to K through 8, which I know nothing about, caveat, there probably is a higher propensity for intrinsic motivation, just because your teachers aren't pushing you to do well necessarily. Your ability to succeed relies completely on your shoulders. And so if you don't have intrinsic motivation, you kind of get, for worse, in my opinion, left to the wayside right now.
Right. So
and I don't agree with that, but I'm saying that that's what I think the case is right now.
Okay. So maybe there is a shift. We're not sure what degree, but like it might be a little shift.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, and one of the things we hope to achieve through PH2 is the establishment of student-centered classrooms, which we say literally every single episode. But within a student-centered classroom, you also inherently kind of get more intrinsic motivation. Because as students are held accountable for their own education, their own learning, that's going to become intrinsic.
Yeah.
So the external evaluation on student perspective for evaluation is grades. Mm-hmm. And you can get grades through 2 different types of motivations. And as an educator, it's important to recognize that you have 2 types of students who are motivated, and they're going to get the same outcome.
Yep.
So working with those 2 types of students to get them to the same outcome is really important. There's also in some schools, I mean, if anybody's attended these schools, it'd be nice to hear, because I went to super hippie dippy liberal Washington place.
And now you're at like the slightly more hippie, slightly more dippy UC Santa Cruz.
I don't know. It's up there. It's different kind of hippies, but yeah. Mm-hmm. We had a college called
Baiana.
Diana.
Yeah. Thanks for joining.
Yeah. We'll be besties soon.
Tell us about your college.
Yeah. So we had a college in our university called Fairhaven College, and they didn't give out grades, they gave out written assessments.
Mm-hmm.
So there are certain schools that are shifting more towards a more liberal way of assessing students, but those can only be applicable in really small classrooms. So
Right.
in higher ed, you're going to have grades, and the important part about being in higher ed and recognizing that that is your external evaluation is recognizing the two types of students who are going to be getting grades. And extrinsically motivated and intrinsically motivated,
Yep.
and motivating both of them through a student-centric classroom. Bam, nailed it. Okay. Internal
I
evaluations.
was gonna say, yeah, I don't see any follow-up questions. Next point. Next talking point.
Internal evaluations are self-assessment forms. So I have self-assessment forms written a couple of times on my very lovely table here. But a self-assessment form from a student perspective is usually something that the educator has to give to the students. And this is going to be different for an instructor perspective.
You mean they're not spending their Friday nights just going over self-assessment forms in their dorm?
They're not spending their Friday nights with their homies playing beer pong and making a self-assessment form. No. So
I can't imagine. What was your college like? Right? Okay, I haven't said it on the show before, but you know that I didn't drink until I was 27.
right. Yeah.
Okay, I was an RA in college too, in undergrad, and I spent my 21st birthday watching...
West Coast in a nutshell.
Yeah, thank you, Willie.
Yeah.
Spent my 21st birthday watching Avatar with my friends, like, in a movie theater, and I went up and worked the next morning. It was I had a 21st birthday on a Friday night, too. Anybody else would have loved that.
I spent my 21st birthday hammered in a gay cabaret. I don't even want to talk about it. Yeah. Anyway.
So there are different types of students.
Yeah. But I mean, that was like one of the 10 times I partied in college, right? Like, I didn't have time to party. And it was
I still got to tell you the mattress surfing story, but...
It was my 21 run, and my mom was like, we're going to take you out for your birthday. My mom was the one who was like, Caileen, you literally never get out and party. We're going to go party on your 21st birthday. So my mom took me to a gay cabaret, and we partied.
Shout out to Mama Bryson.
Shout out to Mama Dore.
Ah, pardon. Yes, Mama
Yes.
Dore.
Okay, so
the
these self-assessment forms are things that you're going to need to provide to your students as an educator. And these are things that ask questions such as, how did you study for the last exam? Were you happy with your outcome? What things did you change? How many hours a week did you study? How many days before the exam did you study? So it forces them to ask themselves about their study habits and the outcomes of their study habits. And so while it may seem like a waste of time, students oftentimes find them really helpful. And one of the things that I like to do with these self-assessment forms is give them to a student before and after an exam.
Yep.
And there's usually multiple exams within a quarter. And then before their next exam, give them back their self-assessment form from after their first exam. So they can...
Ooh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So they can reflect back on their last exam and how their outcome was and what they wanted to change and actually implement that in their second exam.
Oh, man, how honest is... That's amazing. And at the same time, like, I can't... That would just suck to be that student who writes down, before the exam, I prepared terribly. I am super hungover right now. I can't take this. I am falling asleep on my pencil as I write this. But then again, like, internalizing that feedback afterwards must be incredibly valuable.
Oh, yeah.
To realize, like, oh, yeah, I did not prepare at all. I deserve whatever I'm getting right now.
Yeah, forked up. So the implementation of the self-assessment form is then changing study habits, obviously, but also adjusting your schedule and your lifestyle accordingly. Because as you kind of accidentally pointed out for me, sometimes you make shitty decisions, right? And sometimes you're like, it's a good idea staying up until 3 and rallying the night before my exam. It's never a good idea. And so that self-assessment form not only can help you adjust your study habits accordingly, it can also help you adjust lifestyle habits. And oftentimes we don't like to admit when we suck at stuff, or we don't like to admit when we do stuff that's stupid and or wrong.
Yeah.
Stupid being a word that I'm using here like in air quotations because I don't really love that word at all, actually.
Yeah.
But it gives you a chance to be abruptly honest with yourself. And so as an instructor, you can pass out these self-assessment forms to force students, force is not the right word, to encourage students to think about their study habits and their lifestyle choices. And then just make sure you pass back that self-assessment form before their next exam, so they have a moment to internalize it and hopefully take action upon that.
Yep.
So.
Have I talked about the Jedi Councils before?
Yeah, but I don't understand the reference.
It's a Star Wars reference, but like the purpose of these things as far as like a goal setting thing.
Continue.
Okay, so with the
You can't just like drop a bomb like that and be like, all right, peace.
no, I don't want to explain a thing that I've already explained and be like, hey, look at how amazing I am with this like innovative idea. I stole this idea.
Stole this idea.
Yeah, but I know a good joke when I steal one. Yeah, no,
Am I at 7 already? Flip.
Yes,
it's a
nerd reference.
reference.
Thank you, Cersei. No, it's a the Jedi Councils were like a method of peer-to-peer accountability. So like what?
I don't know.
You're looking at me with a face that says like, you nerd. Yeah, I know. What did you expect? You've known me for this long. Yeah. So I don't think we have a lot of it talked on our fancy table, but like, I am so undervalued. I can't work like this anymore.
I don't know.
I'm getting my water bottle.
Back.
All right.
Okay.
No, don't worry about what a Jedi is, but like
He said it, not me.
Yeah, thank you. The peer-to-peer accountability, like peer-to-peer evaluation.
Yeah.
I don't think we have talked about yet.
We have talked about that a lot, but not with
Not on
respect
this
towards
one.
Jedis.
Okay, so then, all right, so it's worth talking about then.
Yeah.
We have a weekly Jedi Council meeting, which is where I've separated my homeroom into groups that are all based on goals that they share in common. So like people who have artistic goals, people who have sports goals, people who have academic goals, etc.
Okay.
They're in smaller groups, like 4 to 5, and so every week they meet, and it's like a little accountability group.
Okay.
They're able to talk about the things that are interesting to them. And this isn't taking a ton of class time, and it seems to be very valuable so far as far as encouraging the students to pursue something that they're interested in, and then doing that bit of self-assessment on a weekly basis. Now, it's not study habits. For some of them it is because they have academic goals, but it is a way of doing a weekly accountability. And so
that's almost like the student internal self-assessment.
It is. It is both, but then there's a point for feedback too. So like they're able to get together with their peers and kind of bounce ideas off of them.
That's nice.
It's a collaboration.
It's a social network then.
It is, yeah. And for something that isn't inherently grades.
Yeah. Solid.
Yeah.
Huge
I like it.
Does it have to be called Jedi though?
No. This is it came from like there's this entrepreneurship trend to have a mastermind group, and to me that just seems like the dorkiest, like most cliche thing. Like, we're a mastermind getting together to manipulate some entrepreneurship, and I'm just like, oh god, kill me.
God, kill me.
But my class likes Star Wars for the most part. Not everybody, so it's not like the most inclusive thing, but also like calling it teams didn't quite sound like what I wanted it to be, so settle on like a sillier name.
All right. Okay, so if we're transitioning from student perspectives of evaluation in higher education to instructor perspectives, the external evaluation that you're going to be receiving as an instructor,
Yep, got it.
Yep, is student feedback evaluations. Raise your hand if you've ever received an evaluation from a student and thought, did you attend my class ever at all?
Does it have to be written, or can it just be like, Mr. Kelly, this is boring?
That is pretty quick feedback.
Yep.
So it's important to understand that student evaluations can be both very helpful and honestly kind of not helpful sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But they are one of your primary sources of feedback that is trying to go back into the system that you are feeding.
Yep.
I couldn't find a better word. I'm
Nice.
sorry.
But I like the little hand roll as well.
So I mean, my last feedback for my students was actually all really helpful, and they did a really fantastic job, and I was very happy with it. But keep in mind that a lot of these students are coming from a perspective of, again, extrinsic or intrinsically motivated, and as an instructor, it's going to help you to recognize what feedback looks like from an extrinsically motivated student versus an intrinsically motivated student.
Yep.
And sometimes, for better or for worse, you may have to kind of, mentally categorize those in your brain, because extrinsically motivated students aren't always going to give the most helpful feedback because they're looking for probably the best grade.
Right. I am super stoked you said that, actually, because like, do these evaluations go to administration at all?
Yes. Not super duper high up like department head.
Okay, so they'll be able to say, like, there's a trend of people in Caileen's class wanting, like, less examinations or something like that. Or there'll be some kind of feedback that gets to, like, somebody who is in charge of you.
Right, yeah. But I've also noticed, too, that when I implement a lot of the pedagogical practices that we talk about in this entire series, my feedback evaluations are pretty fantastic.
Good.
So, if you want good evals from your students, just watch the entire
Do what we
series of
say.
PH. Yeah.
There's a lot of banter. I gotta upload
Don't do what
episode
we
5.
say, because that's a very dictator, student, or teacher-centric mantra you just preached there on accident. So I'm just gonna...
Just trying to plug. Yeah. This is business, Caileen.
Yeah. Okay, and then for your internal evaluations, what?
I was gonna say something about the student evaluation forms. I was a jerk, and I always just said to my teacher, like, give us more candy. Like, what can this teacher do to improve? Give us candy.
You were the super unhelpful student.
No, I thought I did it once and I was funny, and then I realized, oh, that's actually terrible. This teacher gets like a little bit of feedback every year.
Yeah.
Oh no, I'll.
Did you lose
I just lost it. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Too many concussions.
BMX.
Yeah.
All right. So you still have internal evaluations as a instructor, but unfortunately, you have to provide yourself with these self-assessment forms, because a student's not going to make you in a self-assessment form. And these self-assessment forms are going to be similar in idea to the ones that you give to your students, but you're going to give them to yourself at the beginning of a quarter and at the end of the quarter. And these are things of, I'm going to try this new thing, implement it for the entire quarter, and then see how it ended up at the end of your quarter. They're pretty simple compared to your students' self-assessment forms, which are going to be given back to them within a 3 or 4 week cycle, and they're going to be more about study habits and more about lifestyle adaptations. Mm-hmm. Yours are going to be more about classroom implementations and the consequences upon your students' actions. So, and then just refresh yourself with these self-assessment forms at the end of the quarter or year or trimester or whatever system it is that you're on, to allow yourself to have a moment of reflection.
Could it be shorter than a quarter too? It
could be shorter than a quarter as well. Or, whatever system you're on. It could be... I mean, the only thing I hesitate with in that regard is that I wouldn't want to drastically change my teaching habits in the middle of a session with my students, because they don't have consistency with me then. Right.
I'm thinking, I totally see where you're coming from. I'm also thinking, like, what if you're like pretty sure that something
Thank you, Circe.
What if you're pretty sure that like something isn't working? And so, like, your evaluation is, like, I'm not seeing the results that I want. I got to do something different. And so I'm going to make this, like, on-the-cuff fly. Like, off the
cuff.
I was trying to make a sports reference, but it didn't work.
I think it's off the...
I forget what I was saying.
Off the wall.
Maybe. Kidding. I don't know. But either way, you make the... Oh, you call an audible. That's it. That was this thing I was trying to make. Just the coach does the thing.
I don't know sportsball.
I thought you did. You had the Seahawks score on your phone.
I did. It's 17-14 Seahawks. Dang it.
Sorry. Okay. So either way, you make a decision to change something.
Wait, when did I say a swear word?
I think I did.
Damn it.
I said it under my breath, but you didn't hear anything. And so I don't know. Your evaluation isn't formal, but you're like, something's got to change here so that we can continue to have a good time.
Okay, so I do want to kind of step back and take a serious moment, even though the Seahawks score is also very important.
Arguable.
If something is going terribly awry, please unfuck it, right?
That's the next t-shirt right there. That's the next t-shirt. Something has gone awry. Oh my gosh. Something has gone awry. Yeah, okay. Love it.
Okay, so there's things that may be challenging you in your classroom and your climate, and your students aren't quite used to it yet. And then there's stuff just absolutely going up in flames.
LBH.
Stop it. Stop that thing, okay? Don't wait for your end of quarter or end of whatever reflection. Stop it. Knock it off. But I would hope that would be kind of,
I
somewhat
hope,
obvious.
Yeah.
Like,
That's exactly the question, because if somebody hears what you're saying and says like, all right, a quarter, that's good. That's a good amount of time to like see some change and really like make some like internalize whatever change I was trying to implement. Like that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. But also like, if things are going up in flames, if stuff has gone awry and you need to undo that situation. This is a kid's show, Caileen. We're family friendly. No, we're not.
Dan told me it was mostly 18+ audience.
Man, this is really risque then for some stuff. Let's come with a warning next time.
All right, so...
I hear what you have to say. Moving on.
And I disagree. Okay, bye. All right, so from an employee's perspective, because you have to remember that as an instructor, yeah, it's your job to teach the students, but you're there because you need a paycheck, and this is kind of your job, right?
So I've heard.
So there's the employee perspective as well. And your external evaluations from an employee perspective are going to be written or oral evals from superiors. And this is actually what Patrick has more experience than me, because I don't get a lot of written evals from my superiors. They're just like, you're doing great, Caileen, keep up the good work. So what do your written or oral evals look like from superiors for you as an employee? Okay. And how do they help you in your internal evaluations?
Awesome. Time to monologue. All right. So we have a couple different evaluations. There should be some for your teaching practices. So like somebody who is older and wiser and can kind of judge with an outside unbiased eye that, hey, your teaching practices are effective. We actually do not use student grades or student performance as a method of evaluation for how good the teacher is. Is that a sarcastic clap, or is
No, I'm serious.
Okay, that makes sense to me. It seems like, yeah, obviously, like, your students are going to be different regardless. Like, they're all going to come from different backgrounds. That like this is necessary. Why would like your effectiveness as a teacher be tied to like the performance of your students?
Correct. They should not be.
So I'm glad that that's hopefully becoming less of a thing, if that is a thing anywhere anymore. Yeah. I'm sure the world is.
Because as we'll hopefully get to talk about soon, we'll discuss assessment very briefly and how garbage it is usually.
Yeah. So there's that. Somebody who hopefully can give you some kind of feedback about your teaching even like my first year, like I had no idea how to pace a class. So we'd start with a lot of introduction and we'd like get into like the new content at the very end. And by that time it was like, no, we're packing up. Like, it's recess time. Like, you can't keep us here anymore. What are you talking about? So, like, pacing was, like, a thing that I needed help on. And so getting that evaluation that first year was like, all right, cool, I can implement that now. Cool. And that looked like actually getting some timers in class and timing myself. It was a pain at first, but then it just kind of became second nature.
So that was the implementation of your external evaluation from your superiors.
Exactly. And the internal evaluation, or, like, any kind of self-assessment, we alluded to it a little bit last time with time tracking.
Oh, yes. The time before. We did. I can't remember what episode, but yeah.
Yeah. This was all right, I am spending a lot of time in this particular thing, but I'm really not getting a lot of effectiveness out of it. Like, if I spend an hour coming up with, like, the dopest project for these kids, is that any more effective at teaching them than spending 10 minutes pulling it out of a resource book? Or do I just want to be the one that came up with a really cool project? Yeah. So like there is some honesty to be had with that.
Yeah.
And then so that we have external or internal, peer-to-peer. I feel like with peer-to-peer, it's less evaluation and more like collaboration. Where it's less because everybody has their different teaching style. And I'm very rarely getting the feedback of, like, you should do this, as opposed to, have you thought about this?
From an instructor perspective?
Like, from other, yes. Like, my coworker, like, my colleagues.
Yeah, okay.
Like, I get more of that, which is weird, because a lot of my coworkers have been teaching for longer than I've been alive. So that's always like, whoa, it's always also weird when somebody way older than you calls you, like, Mr. or title or whatever, something.
Yeah, I don't like it when they do that.
I know, it's a little weird.
Okay, I do want to touch on a topic really quick. The topic of assessment and how jacked up it is oftentimes. So a classic example, and you can think about this as an instructor. Sometimes as a TA you can implement this idea, not oftentimes, but if you are looking to be an educator of some sort, I would like you to consider assessment and how jank it is sometimes. Mm-hmm. So a classic example is you are teaching a class of 30 students and you're lecturing at them. Let's do higher ed because it's just what I'm comfortable with. Let's say I have a class of 100 students. It's a moderate sized classroom. And I'm lecturing at them about something for an entire quarter. And then I ask them to give a PowerPoint presentation on something.
That's your method of assessment.
Yes. So instead of giving you a test, I'm going to ask you to do a PowerPoint slide. And you and your group of 5 people are going to work together and give this PowerPoint presentation. Like, raise your hand if you've ever had to do this before, like a group PowerPoint presentation project, right? They're fine. That's great. Whatever. However, the entire flippin' quarter, you've had an instructor talking to you who has never taught you how to use PowerPoint, who has never asked you to work in a group project, and now they think that it's a valid way to test your knowledge is to ask you to do something that they have never taught you in the first place.
Yeah.
I'm going to get 9 points here. That's fucked up. So, so the important part of assessment is that the way that you assess your students needs to match the way in which you're delivering the material. So what I mean by that is if you are asking students to frequently, or if you're asking students at the end to test their knowledge and give them a grade via a PowerPoint presentation, you need to give them instances in the classroom to practice making a PowerPoint presentation and working together. That seems obvious, but it's not. It's also very unfair. I'm on a soapbox real hard right now, but it's also very unfair to lecture to a group of students and then to give them, 2 tests, a midterm and a final, that are multiple choice.
And that's their entire grade.
And that's their entire grade. Have you ever given them little quizzes that are multiple choice? Have you ever asked them to think about the material in that way? If no, then that's a garbage way to assess their knowledge.
I'm assuming that professor, too, isn't doing daily assessments where they're checking student learning.
No. So I don't think there's... Oh, I kind of do. But there's not a whole lot of things wrong with multiple choice. I get it for convenience. But if you're going to be using multiple choice as your main source of assessment on an exam, you need to give students chances to practice multiple choice within that classroom, or it's a very unfair way of assessment. Incredibly unfair. So the only instance where not the only instance, but one of the main instances where this doesn't fall to complete shit in higher ed is lab classes. So we're asking you to do things with your hands. Oh, okay. And that's great. And at the end, we ask you to do another thing with your hands. We're asking you to do things with your hands all week, once a week, every week for the entire quarter. And at the end, you do a thing with your hand and we give you a grade. That is a great example of what assessment needs to look at with respect towards the material.
You're talking about like a practical exam?
Yeah, like awesome. A lab practical.
Okay.
That is a great example of how to not screw up assessment. So, as an instructor, I encourage you to incorporate either low stakes quizzes that are going to mimic what your final exams look like, or bring in opportunities for them to practice the way that you're going to assess them. The example of a PowerPoint slide, teach them how to use PowerPoint for like a half an hour. Don't assume that everyone knows that technology. Yep. That's very exclusive and very rude of you. Give students chances to work in groups of 5 before they have to do a final suddenly. And then teach them how to work in a group. Because they might not know how to work in a group.
Yeah, it's like, I've been sitting next to you for 15 weeks now, and I guess we're going to go to each other's dorms for the first time?
Yeah.
Cool.
So, I encourage you to think as hard as I have thought about assessment, I guess, but just to realize that assessment is really broken a lot of times. Yeah. And if there's nothing else that you learned from this very short 5-minute soapbox on assessment, it's that assessment needs to match the way in which you're delivering material. If it's not, it's unfair. This is why things like the WASL don't work, or the CASL don't work, or a lot of standardized tests don't work, because you'd never ask students to regurgitate the information in the manner of those standardized tests. This is why the GRE kind of sucks too. We've never asked you to regurgitate this material in this manner before. Some students are very good at test taking. Some students aren't. This is because they've never been asked to think that way. So that's my 5-minute soapbox on assessment.
I feel like that's a good thesis to end on, though.
We do have someone's question too.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, yes. I do like the idea of hey, assessment should match the method of instruction.
Correct.
I like that a lot as an overall thesis.
Thank you.
We have some questions to answer.
We do. We have one question to answer. We're not that cool.
But if anybody wants to get some more questions in before we end.
You have 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so the question was, and this is for Patrick, What do you suggest for teenagers? Common evaluation or something else?
So this was do you know who asked it?
I'll figure it out.
Thank you.
You go.
Okay, so common evaluations for teenagers. I think that...
Oh, I can't pronounce this. Erminijal. Handles are so hard.
Yeah. You never know if it's like an abbreviation or whatever it is.
I can't pronounce the handle very well. I'm sorry.
Yeah. But thank you for that. Thank you for that question. The question again was, what methods of evaluation do you recommend for teenagers? And I think that kind of going with this thesis now, Caileen, I really love how you put that. If we're gonna go with this thesis of it's got to match whatever the instruction was.
Also, thank you for liking my soapbox, Jenny and Circe.
Then think about what your method of instruction was. Did you teach a lab class, and are you going to give a multiple choice test? Is it exactly the opposite, where it's been mostly like theory and stuff in textbooks, but now all of a sudden your assessment is a project? You know, I think that whatever it is, it has to match whatever.
Sorry,
okay.
Camera.
Yeah. So whatever you've doing, whatever you've been teaching, make sure that you're evaluating in that way. So you can still do a practical hands-on test in a science class. I'm thinking I had instances of high school science where yes, it was mostly a lecture learning class, and then most of our assessments were on paper. But we've also had lab classes where there was a lab final and a lecture final, and I think that's great. Yep. I would hate to have just either or. So I think as long as it matches, you're good there. There's also with teenagers, and I think this is such an amazing part about teaching high school, is you have the opportunity to trust them with cool, creative ways of doing assessment. So like you have the ability, depending on what your school has available to it, to do like a video assessment. Can they make a project that tells the story of something? Can they put together like an Adobe Spark page? It's pretty easy to do with like a Chromebook. As long as you teach them how to use Adobe Spark. Exactly. You can't just be like, yep, watch some YouTube videos, figure it out. But yeah, that's an easy enough thing that you can do as an instructor to like, hey, we're going to be doing this project. I'm going to give you a little crash course on how to do this and practice it real quick in class.
Yes, in class being the keywords there.
Yep.
If you're going to ask them to do something that they don't know, don't assume that they're going to go home and learn it on their own. If you're asking them to do something that's coming from you, an external source, you also have to give them time in the classroom to learn the thing that you're asking them to do.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
And we gotta go, dude.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
All right.
The Seahawks score 17-17.
I was going to watch it later. No, it wasn't.
No, you weren't.
No. I'm going to go film the video. All right, well, that does it for us. Thank you for watching Pedagogy Hypothesis episode 6. I got to get episode 5 up on the Nexus. We have a handle now for the YouTube.
Oh, I forgot.
I think youtube.com/Nexus Science. Yeah, so if you want to go check out, this is all going to go on YouTube, so you can share it with people, or you can... you can watch it again if you just want to see, if you want to actually check how many times Caileen said the F word and see if we're at her 9.5.
It was a rough week, guys.
You have every reason to. Yeah, you have every reason to. It is definitely fun. Yeah, Nexus Science, perfect. You can check that out, subscribe to all that fun stuff. You can follow us on Instagram. I am at @PatrickKelly_. On YouTube, I am youtube.com/Corporus. On Instagram, you are Caileen Bryson, CAIMARISON. And we'll have it here down below if you're watching on the UTizzle.
And next week, we're talking about In the Field.
Yeah, I'm so excited for that one.
So come hang out with us next week. And hopefully the world will be a little bit kinder to us this week. And we'll talk about In the Field.
Honestly, it's like, how could this shit get any worse?
Well, dude, don't say that. I said that 2 years ago.
Oh, okay. All right. We love you all.
We gotta go.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.